Why I became a coach? Well, I love working with people. And when I was growing up, I was a leader in my sports. I just happened to be team captain or working with my teammates, and I was good at so-called sharing advice and strategies, how to persevere and win. And as I grew up as an athlete, I just, again, loved communicating how people could become better. So naturally, I became a coach, and it was just something I've always probably wanted to do. Well, I grew up in an environment where triathlons was almost part of the culture. I grew up in Penticton, BC, so the environment itself was perfect for swimming, biking, and running. And I think that's where some of the first triathlons were ever created, pretty much. And so as a kid growing up, I just always wanted to do it. I couldn't swim, but I thought that was challenging to be able to do that. I had a lake nearby, and so I continued with that. I grew up as a runner and a soccer player, but triathlons was very intriguing. It was a challenge for me. My first experience in a triathlon, I believe it was here in Calgary. I was living in Penticton at the time, and one of my idols, Dave Scott, he was in Calgary at the time, and I made the big trip from Penticton to Calgary. And I remember those days we didn't have a wetsuit, we didn't even wear really formal helmets. We just had an old road bike, and we did the swim again without a wetsuit, and we just kind of were founders in the sport. And I just remember it was very emotional to meet my idol, Dave Scott, and after that just kind of tried to swim, bike, and run. But it was something that was an incredible experience. You only do your first race once, and I still recall that day, and I fell in love with the sport. Why I like coaching? Again, I love helping people. I guess helping them achieve their goals. I like bringing out their inner passion and exploring what their abilities are. I think if people stay with the endurance side, every year they can get better and learn more. And so I like to share my experience, again, being an athlete in the triathlon realm for over 25 years, and my formal education. I love sharing that with my athletes, and that's, I guess, the coaching side of it. My day, well, it starts not that early actually, about 8 a.m. I don't have to get up that early because I wake up and I'm at work, which is nice to work from home. When I'm not coaching, basically, I try to spend time with my daughter. I have a 7-year-old daughter, which is always fun. She's in school now, so I have to wait until she's out of school. But other than that, my free time during the days is training personally. I'll go out and do my own training, swimming, biking, and running, or cross-country skiing, or fat biking, or whatever I have on my agenda. And just catching up with friends, basically. It's a difficult lifestyle because usually our evenings and weekends as a coach are pretty much spent working. So it's that mid part of the day where we have our free time. Balancing my work, I guess my pastime, my social life, all of that sort of stuff, it all gets molded into one, basically. A lot of my clients are my friends, and obviously my family life with my daughter, I just try to carve out some time with that. So it's more about time management. It's more about not necessarily saying that I work Monday to Friday and then I take time off. I work every day pretty much. I'm always contacting and communicating with my athletes, and so I just let that go. There's no real formal aspect of my career. It's just who I am, and so I'm coaching all the time. I try to get social aspects after coaching. I go out with the team, that aspect, and then definitely try to make it a priority whenever I do have free time to spend some time with my daughter. Coaching is a difficult lifestyle. Again, it's something, again, you get pulled and pushed in many directions all the time. So your work ethic basically has to be there. And I think I learned my work ethic just as becoming an athlete. I knew that if I actually could get up early at 7 in the morning and run before, this is high school, that the rewards would be great when I went to competition. And so I learned that at a very young age. And work ethic wise, I carried that through, I guess, that philosophy. And when I did my master's degree at the University of Calgary, same sort of thing. That level of work is much higher than an undergrad degree. So you just have to implement your time and organize your time and just know that you've got to do the work. And it becomes a priority. Well, training athletes for triathlons, I mean, tri meaning three, there's three sports. And so that's the complexity of it. And it is a sport by itself. In other words, we can't just train them as runners, and we have to always try to calculate how much training stress that an athlete will go through when they've done a hard bike session and then they have a track session potentially the next day. So it is very complex. So if you compare that with, I guess, playing a team sport, triathlons is an individual sport, again, with lots of different moving parts. Skill set wise, swimming is very technical. So from that perspective, there needs to be lots of time spent in the water, learning proper mechanics and technique, and then basically keeping the frequency of that swimming up nice and high. So triathlon itself is a very unique sport when you compare it to a lot of different other ones. Again, I coach marathoners, I climb, or Mount Everest climbers, I've coached a lot of different sports when it comes to endurance. But again, triathlon is probably the most complex of them. The elements of triathlons that appeal to me? Well, triathlon itself has a lot of different pillars per se in terms of the distances. So we know it's swim, biking, and running, and generally that order stays the same, but we have a whole variety of different distances. So from the sprint distances all the way up to the ultra endurance distances, and I think that's appealing to me. I think that can reach out to a broader population base. And then the triathlons itself, the way it's set up, is that it's a cool sport that age groupers can race against professionals, which is really neat. We have our own world championships as age groupers, which I think is really special as well, where anybody learning the sport and actually can learn it to a point where they get good enough that they can race at a world championship in their age categories. I think that's really cool. That's really appealing to me personally, and appealing to a lot of my clients. They really love to kind of reach that next level and eventually race for our country, Canada, against an international field. So triathlon is unique that way, and I think it's a great sport. It's a great lifestyle sport too. Whether or not you compete or not, swimming and biking and running, I mean, is a great way of staying fit, staying young through our so-called journey of life. How do I motivate my athletes? Well, you know, they're very motivated, actually. I find that athletes that come to me, they're looking more for guidance. They're looking for science and experience to help them achieve their goals, personal goals. Motivation often with endurance athletes isn't necessarily difficult. However, there are times where the motivation wanes or there's fatigue associated with that, and that's where that one-on-one communication to say that it's completely normal. Let's step back, let's make some changes here so that people's motivation comes back to, I guess, a normal level, I would say. So I will stand behind them and rah once in a while, but often I don't need to. The feeling that I get when I see an athlete succeed, win a race, or set a goal and achieve it is being very proud of them. Again, I'm very intimate with them, meaning I know how much work it's taken for them to achieve that. So personally, I'm very proud. I mean, it's almost like you've got 30 or 40 kids out there and they're sort of learning and growing and achieving. So when they do set new personal bests, yeah, I'm very proud, I'm very happy. And then of course, the next step is to evaluate and try to now set new goals and new boundaries at which, again, they can keep pushing I guess the development. And it may not be that same year, it might be a year later or 2 years later, but pride. Well, the feelings that I get with somebody doesn't quite meet again, their goals is, I mean, obviously you're feeling a little bit disappointed in the way that the outcome was, but it's just an outcome, and we all learn from an outcome that may not be what we were hoping for. So, and then my job as a coach is to position it properly. You know, it's not a failure. Certainly it's not a failure, and we learned a lot from that experience. And then in the realm of performance, there's so many factors that can affect the outcome. I mean, whether it's weather, whether it's the body, if it's healthy or not going into the performance. There's so many ways at which you can educate the athlete so that they understand that it wasn't a failure. It was just one of those days that may not have been the outcome that we wanted to. So yeah, there's a little bit of disappointment, but it's easy to position it so that it doesn't feel like an emotional loss. Goals that I have for my current athletes, my goals are to make sure that I am giving them the best coaching advice and the environment at which they can achieve their goals. And so that would be my goal in terms of giving them the best opportunity to achieve their goals. The skill in endurance athletes that is most underrated, that's probably behind the scenes, that a lot of people that see endurance athletes, is the mental side. The mental patience that it requires to be able to develop as a good endurance athlete has to be present. But a lot of people don't see the mental side, and you can't really see what's going on in someone's head. As a coach, I'm actually trying to communicate or draw out from them what's going on in their head. But that's an area that's always constantly developing, and each and every athlete is different in terms of what they're thinking about or what their mindset is like or their tactics and preparation mentally. The physical side is fairly straightforward. They either do the work or they don't. That's pretty black and white. But what's going on between the ears, that's usually where things get muddy, and we're trying to get more clear. But again, that's an area that a lot of people won't see when they go to an event like a triathlon and watch these athletes doing a triathlon. They can't see what's going on in their head. And it's really an interesting area of study, actually, the sports psychology. Cherry picking the skills for the perfect athlete, well, coachability would be a real good asset for sure. Someone that's very committed, hardworking is critical for sure. A fast learner, a body-mind connection, because in the swim, again, it's very technical. So to learn the proper technique, you got to be able to understand what you're trying to achieve and then eventually get your body to do it. So that learning capability is very important. And just a really good attitude. The difference between being a winner and a loser. Well, I hate that word loser because, again, depends how you position things. It is never really a failure or a loss. But if you really think of it, it's someone that gives up in the sense or decides to quit in a way that, there's so much more potential there if they keep going and yet they just pack it in. In essence, that would be a so-called, my only definition of failure is to really quit. We know that there are emotional foods that we all like. We know that we can't live our lives by not necessarily eliminating all of that. And I think balance in terms of how you choose those foods that are emotional versus the foods that we all are very aware of that we should eat. And then I believe that there's a period of time where an athlete or a person can focus and really be very clean with their choices. And so, again, adequate protein, adequate essential fats, adequate carbohydrates, staying away from all the emotional processed foods and sweets and stuff. Usually there's a time frame about 6 weeks, I find anyways, that people can be extremely clean and very, very diligent about what they eat. But beyond that, it's just a matter of staying realistic and in balance. My advice regarding mental training, well, you can seek professional help in that regard. There are some amazing sports psychologists out there. Mental training also can be learned by interviewing people that are veterans in the sport, whether they're athletes or coaches like myself. But the mental side of things, again, is to try to stay positive. Try to keep everything in perspective when it comes to anything that's a goal. I find that the sport of triathlons can be very all-encompassing and a little bit overwhelming for some people. They become a little bit more obsessive with it. So again, the mental side of things is just, again, keep things in balance. Things aren't always going to go perfect. And you just chip away, take one day at a time. And then when you get into a race scenario, there's very few races that are going to go perfect. Advice to any athlete starting endurance sport or training triathlon is you have to be patient. The human body adapts in a way that it does take a little bit of time for it to develop its endurance capacity. So 1 year isn't necessarily going to turn you into a world-class Ironman athlete, for instance. It's going to take a decade or 2 decades for the body to be able to adapt in a way that you want it to. Advice for quality versus quantity of training, you know, there has to be, it's a pendulum. It will always shift back and forth, and it depends on what the goals are. If somebody says that they're going to do their first Ironman full distance or long course triathlon, then the quantity is very important. Like, you can't get around the fact that you are going to be out there for 10 hours, 12 hours, 17 hours. So time has to be put into the development of that athlete. But then on the other side of it, if an athlete has a short triathlon as a goal, then it has to be also quality work, which is simply intensity, short, with a specific objective to it. And so it's a bit of a pendulum back and forth. It depends on the athlete's background as well. Sometimes I'll get an athlete that did ultra running and their endurance capacity is pretty much already developed, and so we have to redefine or define other areas of the sport. Obviously the swimming technical side of things, the cycling is a bit maybe even of a volume. So even quality versus quantity is different between the 3 sports, swimming, biking, and running. Weight training has its place, and as long as it doesn't necessarily take the place of swimming, biking, and running specifically, it can be woven into a plan where it might be 1 or 2 sessions a week. And weight training doesn't necessarily always have to be in the weight room. It could be just doing body weight exercises, resistance training using tubing or band work. But it usually needs to be time managed in a way that it's going to be a part of the aerobic training. So for instance, we do track workouts, and within the track workout, maybe midway through an interval set, we'll stop and do all our body work, plyometrics, core work, all that sort of stuff, and then we'll resume our track workout, do the rest of it, and then eventually do the final phase of our body strengthening and resistance training at the end. As a coach, if an athlete has a weakness, I mean, I certainly can outline it by showing them results of a race, for instance, comparing them to people in their own age categories, and we can identify that there is a weakness, say, in the swim. Usually they know that. Usually an athlete knows what their weaknesses are. As they get higher in the ranking levels of their age group, or starting to get into that strong elite performances, usually tactics may come into play. For instance, in a draft legal triathlon, the swimming component is extremely important, as is the running. But the swim, if you're not within the first or second pack, it's very difficult for you to have the outcome that you want.
I've been in a 24-hour race with Cal, pouring rain, in the car, eating my lunch, listening to good music, and I look, and there he is doing his 5th lap in the pouring rain while everybody else is running for cover.
I actually look up to anyone that's committed to that journey of making high performance a reality. So that is reaching a national level or to the Olympics. And so I have met quite a few of these athletes, too many to name, but I categorize them into people that are really striving for that pinnacle, that peak performance in their life. Regarding my style of coaching or what I bring to the table that might be a little bit unique is just, again, being an athlete, I've been able to sort of use that knowledge and incorporate it into the science of coaching. And that's, again, more my master's degree. And when I combine the experience plus the high level of education and then the coaching intuition, because there's a lot of coaching intuition that goes on, and that's basically 25, 27 years of coaching. Okay, good, Joel. Head down and watch that entry on their right. A little wider on the outside. Come on. Here we go. I am fairly patient at times, and then just like any other athlete, I really want a lot of change to happen quickly. But again, the more years that I do this sport, the more I have to just believe in myself. So often there's always self-doubt moving into any competition. I'd like to be remembered for a contribution to the community as a whole, offering a service that people, say Calgarians, could come and become fit, learn how to swim, bike, and run, or go out and enjoy a really good newfound fitness level and see our Rockies and that sort of thing. So transforming, I guess, people from a state that they were maybe not happy with or they wanted to change to a state that they're extremely happy with, that changed their lives. So as a life changer, I guess, from a coaching perspective.